Okay, we're all pretty much thinking the same thing. DMZ is missing something, maybe even a few things, and I don't see anyone really discussing it. Once you complete all the faction missions, what's left? What is the point of dropping into Al-Mazrah after that? PvP? You can just play Warzone at that point. I've been exclusively playing the DMZ since its release, and I actually think that the problem begins even before you get to that point. And unfortunately, if the DMZ devs don't fix it, this mode is still in beta. It is entirely possible that they would just scrap it and invest all their effort and resources into Warzone. Why? Money. Money is always the answer to why. Why did you take that job? Money. Why does Nadia cheat? Money. Yo, why did you pee on somebody in a cardboard box? Money. This is the biggest barrier potentially holding the DMZ devs back from adding the features and changes that we're gonna talk about in this video. Like for instance, it's almost unanimous at this point that the community would like to see lootable weapon attachments, like you see in Tarkov. This gets mentioned in my comments all the time, and it adds a whole nother layer to the progression in the game, outside of your missions. The point of lootable attachments would be to have contraband weapons that can now be saved in your stash that you can also fully customize with whatever you find, not only randomly from crates and lockers in Al-Mazrah, but also ripped off of the guns of enemy players that you've killed. Like, they've copied so many features already from the father figure of extraction looter shooters Escape from Tarkov. Why did they not take the features that were going to add more depth? Remember the answer to all why questions? Money. If the contraband weapons were fully customizable, this would place more of your focus on running those guns and not as much on your insured weapon, which is the gun that you can pick according to what you have unlocked across all Modern Warfare 2. This includes skins that you've paid for, and for you to even give a half a rat's ass about your contraband weapons, the insured weapon would need to be tougher to obtain. Right now, if you die with this gun equipped, you have an hour-and-a-half timer before you can use it again. But this can be quickly decreased by extracting items and cash from the DMZ. These items are not saved in some type of inventory, which you know I'm going to talk about next, but instead they're just turned into XP gain and decrease the cooldown timer of the insured weapon. This allows you to not really have much fear of losing it, because you're always going to get that gun right back pretty quickly. So why even worry about what contraband weapons you have? So it's pretty simple. Make insured weapons either have a longer cooldown or add a mechanism where you have to buy it back with cash or other items extracted from the DMZ. This would place more emphasis on contraband weapons, especially when you add in the ability to customize them with attachments found in raids. This adds depth to the experience. All the additions we're going to talk about in this section will fall under that umbrella. You see, there's three major things the DMZ could add that if you care about this game mode, you will spread this message to Infinity Ward, Raven Software, or whoever so that they can see what we all want. Now, the problem with contraband weapon customization and adding more factors into insured weapon cooldowns is there would have to be a place where these items can be held outside of the raid. This is another feature that I'm positive you're all going to agree with being necessary to the game mode's long-term success, and that's an extended stash. Now, honestly, they don't even need to go to the links that Tarkov does. In EFT, you have a massive stash that holds pretty much everything from keys to guns, bags, and random loot, like the toothpaste that we find in Al-Mazrah. How I would picture it working in DMZ is just increasing the size of your contraband stash. The key stash can remain as it is, but instead of contraband holding only guns that you find within raids, allow us to store attachments, additional plate carriers, and backpacks, as well as random loot that can be used for the next major feature that they also need. Instead of just weapons, they could call it contraband, and let it start with the same amount of slots that it has now, 20, but maybe over time you'll be able to upgrade it to maybe 40 or 75 and then to 100. Once again, adding further to the player's progression outside of faction missions. And the items that you can store in the contraband stash need to have more variations as well. The plate carrier system only has 3 iterations: the single, the double, and the triple. There is no difference from the armor system in Warzone, but DMZ needs more depth than that. What I want to see them do with plate carriers is, first of all, drop us in at the start without even the single. That way it gives us even more to grind towards. But more importantly, once we exfil with one from the DMZ, allow us to bring them to some sort of crafting bench and upgrade them with different benefits. For example, you have a 2-plate carrier, and let's just say 3 plates are harder to find, but you can take it to the crafting bench, and if you have 50,000 in cash cash extracted from the DMZ, as well as 3 gas cans and 3 bandages, you can add a flame retardant upgrade that makes the player wearing it unaffected by fire, basically making Molotovs useless against you, or upgrading to be unaffected by EMP, suppression mines, and shock sticks by taking your plate carrier to the crafting bench with 50,000 in cash and a laptop and a GPU. What this stuff does, it allows players to create builds and places way more emphasis on looting and surviving to make it to exfil. This simultaneously adds to the risk for reward factor. If there aren't legitimate reasons for you to actually want to survive, then the result will be in-game just being PvP. I already rarely see players with anything else in their backpacks besides maybe a couple tier 5 mission items and self-revives. There's no point to pick up GPUs or gas cans after you've completed the missions that need them, rendering most of the game mode's items useless after just the first month of it releasing. Can you see the problem? They could on top of that add a new game mechanic that Call of Duty has never tried before, with a helmet system. Even something as simple that, like the plate carriers, has 3 different tiers. But the only way that this would work is if headshots without a helmet were insta-kill, like they are in Tarkov, and if helmets were much harder to find than plate carriers. This feature is a bit more of a stretch, as it would require much more work from the devs, but it's still something that would greatly benefit the game mode. Same goes for bags. Just like plate carriers, you should drop in with no bag at the start and have to grind to get bigger and bigger backpacks as you go. But instead of just having small, medium, and large, they could even add a sack bag with like 3 slots, as well as a hiking backpack with maybe 15 or 20, and allow us to upgrade the large and hiking backpack to hold 2 weapon slots over at the crafting bench. Now I'm gonna go out on a limb here when I say I don't think that kill streaks, gas masks, and self-revives need to be added to this list of items that you can now store in a contraband stash. But as an alternative, they could be added to an economy feature. All games in the extraction looter shooter genre have traders. Kill streaks especially are extremely OP loadout additions that I do not think we need to be able to stack. But if you use one up, it would be cool if there was a trader that maybe had all of them on a rotation timer so that only certain ones were available at certain times with a high price of like $100,000 or something. That way, if you've used yours up or died with one on you in a raid, you have the opportunity to buy a new one. And while on the kill streak topic, there should be DMZ exclusive kill streaks that are designed specifically for this game mode, like calling in a heavy transport chopper that drops in like 8 special forces to your location and fights the enemies around you. I highly doubt that we'll get something like that because that would be nuts, but I'd love to hear what DMZ specific kill streaks you guys could come up with in the comments below. Now, these traders could also sell weapon attachments, self-revives, revive pistols, and gas masks. The trader or traders could function synonymously with the factions, with all 3 having their own specific shop with exclusive items. The higher that you rank up that faction through missions and buying and selling to their trader, the more items you'll have access to buy. This adds even further importance to extracting items and cash from the DMZ. And now with the new extended stash, you're gonna have a place to put all these items that you're exfilling and buying, and use them in select raids of your choice. Because that's really the crux of this issue, isn't it? Right now, if you have a 3-plate carrier, a kill streak, a revive pistol, and a large backpack, you have to take it with you into the next drop. You don't have a choice. Now, if you can put these items in a stash, this allows for naked runs with no equipment to go from 0 to hero, which is pretty much a staple in this genre. If your regular squad isn't online, you can save that fully decked out loadout for when they're back on and try to go gear up while solo without risking all of your best stuff, instead of having to sweat your ass off anytime that you have a good loadout. Now, the best part of everything that I just said is that all of this could take place at an HQ, kind of like what we had in Call of Duty World War II, but obviously without all of the issues that came with that. This place could function as a hub for players to show off their DMZ stats and skins if you're into that kind of thing. Squad up with players that actually have mics before you drop in and realize you've been teamed up randomly with smooth brains. The Cycle Frontier has been the best in the genre to do this so far. Their HQ, called the Space Station, also includes a player's quarters, which has the same basic function as the hideout in Tarkov, where you're able to use cash as well as items found in raid to purchase upgrades that make your life progressively progressively easier the more that you put into it. Examples of upgrades the DMZ quarters could have is reducing the cooldown timer of your insured weapon slot, if crafting items has a timer on it, which it should, reducing the time it takes to craft, income generators that'll slowly add to your cash flow, reducing the amount of cash that it takes to craft certain items, and of course, like I mentioned earlier, increasing the size of your contraband stash. All of these upgrades could get tougher to reach the further that you climb through the tiers, creating yet another progression feature outside of faction missions. So this HQ could hold the player's quarters, a player hub, contraband stash, traders, factions, even the crafting bench. And I mean, really, the devs could probably just use old assets from the failed Call of Duty World War II HQ for design and then add in new stuff from there. This one is probably a pipe dream, so I would honestly be fine with everything that we just discussed taking place in the menus before you drop in. Now, hey, if you made it this far into the video, or maybe you just clicked ahead, I just wanted to say thanks for watching. Like, I genuinely appreciate your guys' support so that I can continue talking about a game mode that I really care a lot about. If this has tickled your little pickle, please take a moment to consider subscribing. Did you finger blast that little red button? I know you did. So with all of this depth in place with these features that we've discussed, the DMZ immediately becomes more hardcore. With less than half of these additions, the game mode has almost no comparison to Warzone anymore. But the hardcore elements shouldn't stop there. Within the DMZ, there are some changes that I think should be made too. A day and night cycle has already been talked about by the devs, and I gotta admit, it has me super excited. So how this works in Tarkov is you choose to drop into any given map at either day or night. Some missions are going to require you to explore maps at night, and this is an entirely different experience. In the DMZ, it should be the same way. The maps at night should have almost no visibility, to the point where you can't even see what's in front of you without using a tactical flashlight mounted onto your weapon, or a new item that we haven't needed in the DMZ until now, NVGs. The night vision goggles in the campaign were beautiful. Getting to use them in Al Mazrah while trying to sneak around the map would be a dream. And once this new cycle is put into place, I'd really like to see them added to your loadout alongside gas masks and self-revives as something you can lose but not be able to stack up in this inventory. They shouldn't be a commodity, forcing players to accomplish some of the night raids using a flashlight so that the visibility remains lower for most players as well as the AI. I'm also excited to see how this weather system is going to work and how it's going to affect players once it's been implemented. In the initial COD blog, right before the DMZ launch, we got mention of a sandstorm that would be coming to Al Mazrah, and I'm thinking that this may be part of the weather system update, and it blinds or damages players getting caught in its path, forcing them to seek shelter inside of buildings whenever it's overhead. But the most important hardcore feature that the DMZ needs is the removal of the tag map. For exclusive Call of Duty players, this may be a bit controversial, but let me show you how it would work. This is something that up until I got to play Building 21, I didn't think that the devs would add to the DMZ. It's kind of already too late for Al Mazrah as the tag map has already been implemented, and I don't think players would appreciate them removing it. But Building 21 has no tag map. You have to utilize wall-mounted maps of the stairwells to find your way around. This makes any drop into Building 21 even more stressful, until you memorize the building layout, that is. In future planned DMZ maps, they could continue on with this precedent, creating more suspense and rewarding players that take the time to learn all the locations. Keep Al Mazrah as the beginner map, that's basically an introduction to the game mode, but the maps that follow could become progression-based, like you only travel to them once you understand the game better and have reached that point in the missions, where you need to drop into them to progress. Now, my personal favorite hardcore edition would be what I mentioned earlier, with headshot damage in this genre, especially when there's no solo queue. Making headshots without helmets, that is, an insta-kill, would be extremely helpful to solo players when up against squads. Which brings us to the final section, solo balance. As we already talked about in a previous video, the devs have no intention of adding a solo queue. So if you play solo, you will always be up against squads when you drop into the DMZ. And I'm not mad about that, but they need to create features that give balance to players that don't raid the DMZ with a squad. Because I think there's quite a few of us. Unless you're a pure Giga Chad, drinking your dinner smoothie, comprised of ground up cheeseburgers and Mountain Dew, through a McDonald's straw while you wipe Timmy's. If you're solo and get into a fight with a 3-man team with 3-plate carriers, you almost always lose that scenario. Headshots getting the insta-kill would help, but it's not enough. There needs to be specific features that only apply to solo players that untick that squad fill option before they drop in. Maybe they could give you a specific perk that is only applicable to that current raid you're in. Maybe they give you better spawns or an extra exfil chopper. When it comes to what would help solo players perform better against squads, I'm really not sure exactly what would help. That wouldn't simultaneously create even more imbalance or systems that players could abuse. I just know that they need to improve the experience for average solo players. With DMZ being in beta, it has just as much opportunity to make big changes before its full release than it does for them to scrap the game mode entirely. So all of these implementations aren't even out of the realm of possibility. They aren't abstract either. Almost everything that we talked about already exists in other games in this extraction looter shooter genre, giving the devs an easy rubric to follow in order to give the players what they want. If there's any content additions that I didn't mention that you think should be added to the DMZ, please let us know in the comments below. These features that we talked about don't have to be added all at once, but even seeing them starting to make some changes in the right direction would be a positive. If you agree, the best way for you to make sure this gets seen by as many people as possible is leaving a like. It's a very simple gesture and I really appreciate it. After that, unfortunately, the devs also just made a big mistake with the new map Building 21. And I don't see anybody talking about it, so check this out. Go check it out. What else do you have to do?